Did King David have an army of bees? How do bees help support the reality of an advanced Israelite kingdom in 3000 BC? At some point in life, every serious adult will ask themselves this question, and in this video, we hope to give you the answer. This is episode 3 in our Biblical Archeology series, also known as Barcheology. Yeah, it's gone on this long, so we're not going to change it now. In the world of Christian music, there's a popular song today called Honey in the Rock. When I first heard this song, I thought the premise was, well, stupid. I mean, honey doesn't come from rocks, it comes from honey badgers. But then I found out that it was based on Bible verses, and I felt stupid. The verses are Deuteronomy 32:13.
He made him to ride on the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields, and he made him to suck honey out of the rock.
And Psalm 81:16.
He should have fed them also with the finest of the wheat, and with honey out of the rock should I have satisfied thee.
In the Bible, honey is often associated with abundance. After all, God himself describes the promised land as a land flowing with milk and honey. Both items can refer to prosperity, but I prefer to think of it as milk being necessary sustenance and honey being just a little bit extra, something on top to make the Hebrews' lives that much sweeter. If you disagree, you're more than welcome to make your own video. I won't be watching it. Even today, honey is extremely popular in the Holy Land. Israelis consume 4,500 tons of the stuff annually, 40% of which is around Rosh Hashanah. Honey is a main ingredient in lakach, also called ugat davash, a sweet holiday cake. Interestingly, honey is the only kosher byproduct from a non-kosher producer, since according to Leviticus 11:23, bees would be classified as unclean. But what does honey out of the rock even mean? Honey comes from beehives, and in the scripture itself we can read about bees building hives in a lion's carcass and also out in the woods, which jives with what we know about bees in nature. At first I thought it was God just being poetic, using strange and mysterious language to make a finer point. But after a little bit of study, I think it's a little bit more than that. I'm going to tell you 2 ways that honey can come from a rock, and the first has to do with King David. About 3 kilometers west of the Jordan River, south of the Sea of Galilee, there's an ancient city called today Tel Aviv. It's one of the largest Canaanite cities in the entire country, and it has a long history of being desired and then conquered by the Egyptians, the Israelites, and the Assyrians. In 2007, the oldest known apiary in the entire world was discovered at Tel Aviv. An apiary is a place to store and cultivate bees. The word comes because the letter B follows the letter A, and if you have a lot of bees, you need to put them in an apiary. That is absolutely factual and is in no way made up on the spot.
You are fake news.
This apiary was comprised of rows of artificial beehives dating to approximately 1000 BC, so right around the time of King David and King Solomon. Since bees naturally gravitate towards things like hollow logs, these artificial hives were made out of unfired clay and shaped into cylinders. On one side, there was a small hole for bees to crawl in and out of, and on the other side, there was a lid that could be removed to extract the honey. And while there were only 30 or so hives remaining, it was estimated that originally there could have been 100 to 200 hives that housed over 1 million bees. That is a lot of bees, especially in the middle of a very large city. You can see from photos how the apiary is kind of in the thick of things, with buildings and streets on all sides. It was most likely built there to keep the honey from being stolen, but it presents an obvious problem. If you think it sounds like a bad idea to have 1 million bees in a highly populated area since they have a tendency to, sting people with poisonous needles, well, you wouldn't be alone in that. In fact, the citizens of Tel Aviv are right there with you on that one. You see, in the excavated hives, archaeologists found remains of the bees themselves. Scientists were then able to examine the wings, heads, legs, and larvae of the bees, and they discovered they weren't the indigenous and rather ill-tempered Apis mellifera syriaca, or Syrian bee. In fact, these bees weren't local to Israel or the surrounding areas at all. It was a kind of bee called Anatoliaca. It comes from present-day Turkey, and this species of bee is far less aggressive than the Syrian bee, and it produces up to 8 times more honey. This means that the people of Tel Aviv, or the Kingdom of Israel in general, would have had to import these bees from great distance. This kind of bee transportation and cultivation was pretty high-end for the time, and likely very expensive. It's further proof that David and Solomon's Israel was not some small, poor backwater collection of cities, but rather the thriving, wealthy, and advanced kingdom that the Bible describes. Amachai Matzar, who oversaw the discovery, had this to say: "This find shows that a sophisticated form of beekeeping on an industrial level was established in Israel some 3,000 years ago. Inscriptions from as early as the Late Bronze Age discuss beekeeping and even the long-distance transporting of bees. But this discovery is the first physical evidence of a skilled, dedicated beekeeping in the region." He also suggested that beeswax from Tel Aviv might have been used in metal casting in the Jordan Valley. The Bible mentions this in 1 Kings when Solomon is putting together implements for the temple. There's an ancient bronze and brass casting technique where beeswax is molded into the exact shape of what you want to cast, and then clay is piled all around, heat is applied to melt the beeswax out, and then molten brass is poured into the hole. Just wait for it to dry, and there you go. Now, the Tel Aviv apiary, it may not be the most monumental of finds, up there with the likes of the Tel Dan stele, which gave the first archaeological evidence of the House of David, thereby proving that he and his line even existed. But in a very real way, these bees are attesting to the same thing: that the Davidic kingdom was not some small, primitive place that the biblical writers made up to feel important. No, it was cultured, wealthy, and oh so sweet. And remember, these hives were made out of unfired clay. Well, if you went to kindergarten, you'd know that clay comes from rocks. So right there is one way that honey can come from a rock. If you didn't go to kindergarten, how did you find this video? But wait, I said there were 2 ways that honey can come from rocks. Well, the second one is one that I saw with my very own eyes. In the northern part of Israel, called the Golan Heights, there's a place called Banyas, or in ancient times, Panyas. It's a nature reserve that, as you walk down, there's a beautiful waterfall at the end of the trail. It actually could have been one of the places where David wrote Psalm 42, verse 7. After enjoying the falls for a little bit, I turned to walk back to our tour bus, and as I'm walking up the trail, I look on the cliff wall and I see some really strange mushrooms growing about 25 feet up. My first thought was, don't mushrooms grow on, like, dead trees and stuff? What are they doing on rocks? But then when I got back on the tour bus, everybody was like, "Hey, did you see those beehives on the rocks?" Beehives, not mushrooms. That's right, bees do in fact build their hives on rocks, and not just in Israel, but all over the world. If you already knew that, well, sorry I wasted your time. There's a lot of metaphors in the Bible, particularly in the Psalms, and at first glance, honey out of the rock, it seems like it could just be a neat way of describing how God provides for his people from unlikely places. And that is true, but it was so cool to know that after all the study, there was no hidden meaning. It literally meant what it said.
There is no secret ingredient.
So there you go, everybody. 2 ways that honey can come from rocks. I hope that makes your life that much sweeter. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe and click that bell and leave a comment down below telling us what you thought. And until next time, remember, don't trust what I say. Trust what he said.